Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NCIHC 14th Annual Membership Meeting, often called the AMM. If you are a new member, welcome to the NCIHC community. We are honored and privileged to have you as a member. And if you have been a long-standing member, we thank you for your continued professional contribution to the Council, as well as we commend you for your commitment, dedication, and passion to language access in healthcare. This is our first virtual AMM, and as with any virtual events that rely 100% on technology, given the wonderful pros and the pesky cons of technology, we will do our best to provide you with a positive experience, and our board and committee volunteers are here to provide you, to offer support as you may need it. And speaking of board members and committee members, there are a few people that I would like to acknowledge this morning, starting with our wonderful MC, Jorge Ungo. Thank you, Jorge, for guiding us once again through the next couple of days of the event. I'd like to also acknowledge our event planning committee chaired by Joy Connell. And that group also includes Maria Michaelchak, Lisa Morris, Kevin Cunningham, and Jason Redschak. Thank you guys so much for putting together a superb program once again this year. And a big shout out to our board committee liaison for the event planning committee, Cristiano Mazzei. Thank you so much, Cristiano, for the many hours that you have dedicated to ensure that everyone was ready for today and tomorrow. And needless to say, a big thank you to all of those board members and committee members who have come forth and volunteered last minute to make sure that the event will take place successfully. Last but not least, I would like to thank our sponsors for their unwavering support. We know that multiple virtual events make it extra competitive to be at the forefront of your choice. And we are honored and privileged that you have chosen to support us this year. To our AMM attendees, I invite you to visit our exhibitor breakout rooms and explore how these companies can benefit you professionally. I think that we can all agree that the past year has been extremely challenging on multiple aspects. Our event this year revolves around the main theme of trauma, social justice, and language. Why? Because many times these three cannot be separated one from the other. Not everyone has a fair chance at life, and COVID has certainly unveiled and unmasked a lot of the barriers that we already knew existed, especially where marginalized groups and minority groups and people with language barriers are concerned. We all have recently experienced a multitude of traumatic events. This can be particularly difficult for people who have resettled to a different country and bring with them a very high level of trauma. I had the honor a couple of years ago to present at a refugee healthcare conference in Toronto. But I was extremely privileged, more than anything, to learn from the many presenters and attendees there about their journey, their struggles, particularly the struggles in the process of finding a better life, integrate into a new society, and having a fair chance at doing that. We are all aware how members of marginalized groups struggle at having a fair opportunity because of systemic barriers. And many of these groups have language barriers as well. And social justice is many things, and many things that also deal with fairness. But to achieve fairness, sometimes equality is not enough, and we need equity. Some of you may be wondering, okay, well, what is the difference between that equality and equity? And I want to share with you an analogy that an instructor of a diversity and inclusion training several years ago shared with me. And it stuck with me because I do have a visual memory. And I'm sure that some of you have heard of this analogy and perhaps even used it yourselves. So I want you to imagine, if you will, three people, all of the same size, and they're trying to stand over a fence and looking over that fence. And all of a sudden, the ground beneath them slopes and it buckles beneath one person so much, so significantly, that one of them cannot see over the fence at all. Of the other two, one can sort of see, and one can still have a full view because they're still standing on the higher side of the slope. Now, under the concept of equality, where there is equal distribution to everyone, that presumes that all of them would be given a box to stand on. But the reality is that the person on the high side of the slope does not need a box because their view is not obstructed. That is where the idea of equity makes more sense over equality. Under the concept of equity, the person standing on the lowest side of the slope will get enough boxes to make up for the difference in height with the person who still has unobstructed view. So perhaps they will get 2 boxes, and the person in the middle with sort of an obstructed view will get 1 box. And the person who's standing on the highest side of the slope will get none. And this will make sure that all 3 people will be brought back to equal grounds and at equal levels. But I want to bring to your attention that foundation that has sloped, that has sunk in which these 3 people were standing on, that unequal foundation. I want to compare that foundation to our system. That foundation is all the policies, all the regulations, the practices that foster inequities in our society, that foster prejudice and bias and racism. And as a result, marginalized people are forced to continue to stand on that lower ground, on that lower level, and perpetuate their traumatic experiences oftentimes. In healthcare, we all know that disparities based on ethnicity and language barriers are not a secret. There is still so much work that we need to continue to do to advance equitable health outcomes for everyone, including people in need of language assistance. And you will find that this theme will be repeated in different emphases at our Language Access Cafe throughout the day. But let us all remind ourselves, and let us all remember that it all starts with accepting that inequities exist at the systemic level. Without that acknowledgement, without that acceptance, it is virtually impossible to intentionally and emotionally and mindfully engage in standards of practice that promote and strive for fairness, and therefore allow for systems to evolve into more equitable ones and finally achieve a better social justice. At NCIHC, we are very proud of the work that we continue to do by engaging with multiple stakeholders and the contribution that we are able to give in promoting and developing policies and practices that can become the golden standard when it comes to breaking down language barriers, so that everyone can have equal voice in healthcare as much as everywhere else in society. And later today, we will have a chance to hear the progress of our work from our committees. So without further ado, let the AMM begin, And I'm going to give the virtual stage back to our wonderful MC, who will be introducing our first keynote in just a moment. On behalf of the NCIHC board, we look forward to sharing what NCIHC has worked on this past year, but most of all, we look forward to learning from your active participation and engagement during the next couple of days of our event. Enjoy the AMM.